Okay, I've just cut a partial front piece because it is so big and we don't need the whole thing for this tutorial. So I'm working on the right side of the jacket. Obviously, here's the side seam. You can see there's a notch there, and then the sleeve would continue on that way if I had cut a full piece. The neckline is up there. So you will lay your pieces. Unfortunately, I'm doing the right side again, so my pattern piece is upside down, but you can see this is where the pocket welt opening is marked on the front piece. I'm laying it down so that I can mark it, and you can see I have already cut this open. I don't have a tracing wheel with like the old school transfer paper, so this is how I do it. I cut along each of the places that need to be marked, which is the long line here, the center line, and then the two triangles. I'm again going to use my chalk marker, and I'm going to just follow along in the cut openings to mark the entire thing. Okay, so you can see I have my chalk outline of the welt opening marked here, and now I'm going to interface the wrong side of this just to give it a little bit more stability when I'm sewing on the welt pieces. So this is kind of a rough marking, but I'm just going to put some pins in the end so that I know roughly where my interfacing needs to go. This is just a rectangle of interfacing. There is a pattern piece for it in this pattern, or you can just cut a long rectangle and eyeball it. So I'm going to position it there. I'm going to go over to my, see, I can see that it's pretty much evenly covering where the pins come through. I'm going to go over to my ironing board. I'm going to carefully remove the pins, and I'm going to press it down. Okay, so the interfacing is fused to the wrong side of the jacket front. So I'm going to flip this back over so that I can see my welt markings. Now I'm going to take my welt lip facing, and you can see it has half of that letter H there, and you can see that this also has a long line and a center line, and that is what we are going to use to align. So the center line's a line, and I'm going to put it right up against that long line. This sewing line does not correspond with this marking. I'm only using the center line and the center line, and I'm putting the edge of it up against that middle line. Then you can pin this in place. I suggest putting pins, out here in the edges down here, because you are going to then sew directly on top of this line, and it's much easier if you don't have to move pins. You need to stop your needle, put your needle down directly in the top, go forward, back stitch, and then stop with your needle directly down at that point, back stitch, go forward to lock it in place. So I'm going to go do that now at my sewing machine. Okay, so the welt lip facing is sewn down. And one thing I forgot to say is, you'll have a mirrored pair, so you'll easily be able to tell the difference on yours, but the straight edge goes at the top, this little pointy edge goes at the bottom, and this welt opening is at the diagonal, but this is the top of the jacket and this is the bottom of the jacket. So I'm going to say it goes on top of this line. Now you have your welt lip, which is sewn to your pocket. You're going to place that face down in the exact same way, except this time when you align the center line, it will also align with the welt lip facing. And you can see the top edges should make a perfectly straight line. These two should align, and they need to stay together all the way down. I'm going to pin this all over, and then I'm going to go through and sew again directly on this line. Okay, so the welt lip piece is also sewn on right along that line, as you can see. And I'm going to use these pins to just hold the welt lip facing and the welt lip out of the way. So really I'm just pushing them back and then holding them out of the way with pins. So now I have revealed my original welt marking. I am now going to cut along each of the triangles at the ends all the way down this long line and then the triangle on this end. I'm not going to cut the center line. That needs to remain intact. And as you can see, the edges of your triangle markings should align perfectly with where your seam stopped. If it doesn't, that's fine, but use the edge of your seam as a guide of where to stop cutting instead of the marking. That takes precedence. This one looks pretty spot on, but I assure you that is not always the case, especially if you're using a shifty fabric. This is denim, so I'm definitely cheating a little bit here with some very easy to use fabric. So the way I cut this is I just like in elementary school, you just cut a little snip there so you can get your scissors in there. And you want to use scissors, unlike mine, that are extremely sharp at the tip so that you can cut right up to the point. And then the same thing, you want to move the welt pieces out of the way and cut right up to where that seam ends. You can see one little stitch showing through there, and I'm using that as my guide. If you have sharpened scissors, then this will be a lot easier. I actually do most of this with a rotary cutter because I use my rotary cutter as much as possible. So this part, just be very careful, but make sure you do cut all the way up to where that stitch line is so that the welt folds correctly. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the other side. Okay, so I have all of that cut, and now we'll move on to the next step.